Hey everyone, I just wanted to check in before we start this week's episode. I know it's been a crazy few weeks for everyone around the world, and I just want to send my love and positivity to everyone. Know that I'm thinking of you, and we're in this together as crazy as things have gotten. I greatly appreciate each week that you come and listen to these incredible stories, and I really hope that you continue to find inspiration and motivation through this platform. Thank you so much again, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Welcome to the Have You Met Her Yet podcast, a podcast by Pink Crown Creative. I am your host, Lindsay Dent, the founder of Pink Crown Creative, a Vancouver-based marketing consulting company. This podcast was created to shine a spotlight on women in the workplace, who they are, what they do, why you should know them. In this week's episode, I speak with one of my very good friends, Ms. Danielle Kates-van. I can't wait for you to meet Danielle. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Have You Met Her Yet? Today I have Mrs. or Ms. Danielle Kates-van Hoek. Hoek. Let me start that again. Ms. Danielle Kates-van Hoek.
Yeah.
Yay!
Woo.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks.
We've known each other since high school, since
Yeah.
grade
Yeah.
nine religion class.
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
So long time. So yeah, if you want to maybe start off by telling us what you do and how you've gotten to where you are in your career today.
Okay. So I am an Ontario certified teacher. I am qualified to teach what's known as the intermediate and senior division. So that translates to anywhere from grade 7 to grade 12. But I specifically teach in high school. I'm certified to teach English and history. That's what my undergraduate degree is, major in English, minor in history. And throughout the years, I've taken a few other additional qualifications for teaching as well. But right now in my career, I focus solely on English. And I teach right now, I teach grade 9 and 10 academic English in
Awesome.
Ontario High School. Yep.
Very cool. So to kind of go back a little bit further, I'm not 100% sure that many people know this, but it's actually not the easiest thing to become a teacher. So if
Right.
you can maybe explain a lot of what you had to go through, maybe even sharing how long it took, the certain things you needed to do to fill in the gaps, because you definitely didn't just graduate university and then you were a teacher.
No. No. Okay. So I graduated from a four-year honors Bachelor of Arts in 2010. And then the requirement at that time was to take 1 year of teacher's college, which would give you a Bachelor of Education. Um, my parents kind of said to me at that point, if you want to do another degree, it's on you. So um, I took a year off to just serve and save some money. And I went to teacher's college at the University of Toronto. Um, Starting in 2011, and then I did my year there, graduating with my B.Ed in 2012. Now, admittedly, a lot of my peers at that time were applying to the school boards right away because they wanted to get right in. I kind of was enjoying the social life of being a server, and I wasn't feeling necessarily the urgency. I wasn't feeling, or I wasn't really, I guess, acknowledging or admitting to myself how long it might take to get into the industry. I was kind of just like, I'll apply after, and after didn't really have a specific time attached to it. So when I did finally get around to applying, I applied once in 2013 to a couple different school boards. I think 3 school boards. Most people do a lot more, but I was kind of wanting to stick close to home. And then it just wasn't the right time for the board, so the floodgates didn't really open up for me, and I kind of had to wait another year, 6 months to a year. They typically open up the hiring in May and in November, so depending on where you fall, they'll either say, come back next time, or they'll take you in. I didn't get in for that one, but I was able to apply again, and then finally in 2014, September 2014 would be my first board that I was on the supply list for. And so I was eligible to supply teach any classes that kind of called me. They have this online system or this telephone system as well where you get jobs. But technically speaking, you have to then supply for a whole year before you can qualify to fill long-term jobs, which would be not permanent, but women who are on mat leave, people who are on extended sick leave,
Right.
things like that. So I was actually kind of lucky. I sort of fell into an LTO job, as they call it.
And what does LTO mean?
Long-term occasional. So those are those mat leaves and everything like that.
Okay.
I was able to fall into one of those quickly before having to complete my 10 months of supply teaching. And it's sad to say, but it's strictly because it's just a position that nobody wanted.
Right.
So I walked right into it because not even anybody that was on the eligible list wanted to apply to it. I applied just as a random supply teacher and got it. And then there was another one that kind of came right after that. And they were only jobs that were a couple months long. But they were able to take me to the point in time where I could then interview to be on that list where I, could apply to all of those LTO jobs now. So I did. I was successful in that interview. So that's interview number 2. You have to interview just to get on the board's list. Then you have to interview to get on the LTO list. So that was interview number 2. I got on the list, but the list for this particular board was thousands of names long. So the way that hiring works is if you want to apply to a job, you apply to it, but only if you're in the top 5 most senior positions do you get chosen for an interview. So because I was fresh to the list, brand
Right.
new, I didn't have any seniority on that list. So anything that I was qualified for and applying for, I wasn't even getting an interview call. And it kind of stayed stagnant like that for a little bit before I realized I need to get on another board. Like I can't stay with this board. This particular board was too big. There were way too many people in line waiting before me that had already been waiting for years. And I'm talking not like 2 years. I'm talking like people that had already been waiting 6, 7, 8 years.
Wow. And that's waiting without a job or waiting with a job that they're just having until they get their dream position?
So that's without a permanent job. So that's
Okay.
filling in for sick leaves and mat leaves.
Right.
So you could go through periods of time where you don't have a position like that, where you have to just wait for the supply calls in the morning.
Right.
So unsteady income, uncertain where you're going to be the next day, that sort of a thing. So I was like, I need to go to a smaller board, and I knew that there was a specific, region that was growing, that was still close by, and I was able to, get on their supply list. And then miraculously in 2015, the same thing happened where nobody wanted a particular LTO job, and I got it without having to even supply a single day for that board. So I got in, but I still had to do the interview process of getting on the LTO list, having several different LTOs. So I would say from start to finish, from my first board to where I am now and to the time that I got permanent, I spent, from those first applications to getting permanent, I spent about 5 years kicking the can.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm only in my second year permanent now.
Yeah.
I've noticed that the climate changed a little bit. There, at least in my board, because it is such a growing region, There were some people that were kind of able to come out of teachers college and walk right into a permanent job right away. But that certainly wasn't my experience, and it all just has to do with timing.
Right. So do you think it just happened to be the years that you graduated, the years that you're looking for positions, there just was an influx of people looking for those jobs,
For sure,
or people
for
have
sure.
stopped wanting to do teaching positions?
So for sure, because so for somebody like me who graduated in 2012 versus somebody who graduated, say, in 2018, they're that much closer to the baby boomers starting to retire, right? Where I was 6 years behind that. So there were still a lot of baby boomers still in their jobs, and there still are. There's a lot of people that are eligible for retirement and still don't go, uh,
Right,
for a
right.
variety of reasons. But that's one of the reasons is that by the time the younger, teachers have come up, the baby boomers are at least starting to retire, whereas when I started, they weren't. The other thing is that now in Ontario, Teachers College is 2 years instead of one. Uh,
Uh,
so when I did it, it was only 1 year. So they had massive amounts of teachers graduating, whereas I think, and I personally think that's why they put in the 2 year system anyways, to slow this down, because there are tons of people that are trying to be teachers. And I think with the 2 year program, slowing down the people that are trying to get permanent jobs, that's maybe part of the reason why as well.
right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. So after all of that you went through, is there anything you wish you did differently, or do you feel like you kind of did all that you could in those times?
The only regret that I would say that I have is not applying right out of teachers college. At that time, like I said, I was enjoying sort of making good money being a server. I was still living at home. Um, I had a strong social life with all kind of the new friends that I've met, and I had this mentality like, oh, I'll get there. And I think now looking back on the fact, like maybe I just wasn't ready to hunker down.
Yeah.
It, and again, I mean, that's okay too. So I don't necessarily want to say that I regret it. When I got permanent into 2018 with people who were like 5 years younger than me, I kind of had a bit of a bitter moment where I was like, how are these people getting permanent at the same time as I am? But then I realized it was a different time. These people did it right out of school.
Right.
I didn't do it right out of school, and you know what? Maybe I wasn't ready to do it right out of school. So that would kind of be the only thing that maybe that I would change. But even then, I still want to give myself a little bit of credit and kind of feel like, if you weren't ready at that exact moment, then maybe it was best for you to wait a year or two.
Absolutely. I think that truly is great advice. It's a scary thought to think at 22, 23, you're going to be in the job you're going to be in for the rest of your life. And so I do think it was something that was a personal choice, of course, but something that benefited you in ways that you were still able to experience, a fun social life, an active, really free life. You still were getting income. It's not like you weren't making any money,
Yeah,
but you were able to fully feel out like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? All this stuff, even though you knew you were going to go in the path of being a teacher anyways.
yeah.
Um, you just took that time for yourself, which I truly believe in. I think it is an important thing for people to do, especially if you weren't ready. I mean, there's nothing worse than you applying for that, hating it, and then, putting a bad taste in your mouth of what, something that was so passionate to you and now is still passionate for you as well, right?
Totally. And I mean, I had this conversation not long ago with my mom, saying, maybe I should have gotten into it a bit sooner. Maybe I'd be in a better position, financially for retirement, for whatever. And she was just like, yeah, but you know what? You had fun. And because you were there for half of them, like we took some trips and stuff like that, things that I
Sure.
couldn't have done during the school year if I was already hunkered down and I had a bunch of other 20 something friends who were like, hey, want to go here? And I was like, oh, like I can't. So
Of
I am
course.
happy that I did spend my 20s living, because you do have the rest of your life to work. And like you said, I am really passionate about what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were to give advice to anyone right now who maybe had to be in your position. I mean, are there other ways or other tips that you could give them that helped you? I know that you said you had to be on a long list, you had to interview, but are there other little things that you might have done that you think helped you?
I definitely think, like, I've had so many interviews for all the supply work, for the LTO jobs, and then eventually for getting a permanent job. In this line of work, interviewing is so um, big, and I don't know, I don't feel that interviewing for me is not like a natural thing. I feel
Yeah.
like there's buzzwords that they're looking for. They're looking for you to use the language of the question within the answer.
Yes. Yes.
They're looking for you to use like a star model or like a situational example where you know, say what you did and then how it relates to the answer, stuff like that. So I don't really feel like an interview is having a genuine conversation. That being said, I think that any sort of interview preparation somebody could do, and I mean that applies really to any line of work, not just teaching. Just teaching, you have to do so many.
Yep.
So I would say interview prep. I think there were, looking back on it, I think there were specific interviews I went for where I could have prepared more. Um, I think that I think being open-minded to the things that you're going to teach is really important as well. I only now, in my second year of being permanent, have a schedule of classes that I actually really love.
Yeah.
Um, I have been made to teach religion. I've been made to teach geography. I've been made to teach a health course. Um, you know, I've been made to teach a learning strategies course, and the list goes on and on. And it's very typical when you're in those beginning years, whether you're doing an LTO or whether you're in your first couple of years of being permanent. Um, the term they always use in teaching is like you get the dog's breakfast, meaning like you get kind of you know, a smorgasbord of like courses that you're not even necessarily familiar teaching, and you end up like kind of having to teach as you go, teach yourself as
Right.
you go, rather. So I would say being open-minded and recognizing that you're not just going to get those, you know, amazing courses that you're really passionate about right off the bat. Like I said, it's taken me about 4 or 5 years to actually get a full English schedule, and English is what I am passionate about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that open-mindedness would be key for somebody coming up in the game as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And just be willing to take whatever you can. As you mentioned before, it seemed like, I don't want to say you got lucky, but you were open-minded enough to get into a board, get a job in that board right away without the supply because you were just open to doing it. You just wanted to be a teacher so badly. You didn't at that point care how you're going to do it. You're going to put the work in, put the effort in, knowing in the future you will be at that point, which thankfully you're here now. But when you took it, you didn't know you would be teaching English within 2
Right.
years, right?
Well, and you know, in my first, to use specific examples, those first three LTOs that I had, the first two in the big board, and then the third one in the smaller board, all of those were in what they call alternative education. So the reason that
Right.
nobody applied to them was because they were teaching, in one of them, kids that were between 18 and 21 who regular school just didn't work out for them for whatever
Right.
reason.
Right. Right.
So those kids get a label, and people don't want to teach them for whatever reason. Another one I taught in was a suspension-based program, so kids that got suspended from school for long periods of time. There was a program that they could go to where their teachers would fax us work for them, and we would facilitate them doing the work. But they're kids that are suspended for all these reasons that we were privy to, and nobody wanted to deal with the suspended kids. And then the next one was teaching adult learners, some of which were new to the country. And so all three of those experiences were my first experiences with teaching, but I wouldn't change those experiences because I think dealing with different learners has actually helped make me a better teacher for mainstream teenagers.
Absolutely. And just build that patience,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with difficult personalities, um, people who don't have English as their first language,
Huge.
people who usually get people that are going to um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they've already kind of given up on them, I guess. So
Yes.
they
Yep.
have that mentality that they already know that they're a failure or whatever, right? So
Oh yeah,
you
for sure.
dealing with things like that are things for sure you're going to deal with a high school student in different ways.
Yep.
I mean, they might be a bit younger, a bit more naive, but those things are shaping within them. So it's
100%.
totally um, a learning curve for you, but also something that I think is necessary and something that I think has probably made you way more patient with the people that you're probably the kids that you're dealing with now, right?
I agree.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one question I have relates to being a female in this industry. So I don't know if this is just something in Ontario because, as you mentioned, it was hard to get a job. Um, are you able to talk about sort of the differences in what you've seen of being a female teacher as opposed to someone coming in who's a male teacher, and maybe if there's I don't know, is there anything you can kind of share about that?
I think for the most part, especially in high school where I work, um, there still, I would say, is more female teachers than males.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more even than it is in elementary school.
Yeah.
So the only time where I kind of feel like throughout the years that maybe being male has been advantageous in getting a job might be somebody who's interviewing for an elementary school job. Because
Oh,
if
okay.
you even think back to like when we were younger, you can probably state that like majority of your teachers from kindergarten to grade 8 were women.
Right.
And so I think that they want to diversify a little bit, and I think that there's um, maybe some specific boards that would see value in having more male teachers in their elementary schools as well as their high schools.
Yeah.
I don't think that I've ever personally experienced any moment where I've felt that being um, female has been disadvantageous to me in acquiring a job, but I do know that, there are probably people out there, especially in elementary school, who would like to have, strong male figures, within their schools and within high schools too, because, um, sometimes our male students are in just as much need of a strong role model as our female students. And
For sure.
um, I think that that is on certain principals' radars that maybe having those key male figures in those schools would be advantageous to that particular population that they're dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good perspective to have, especially, I guess depending on what home life is like, right? If they're looking to get that type of mentor or role model at school, it's very important to have all genders and all walks of life to be represented,
Yep.
because that's at this time in their life, that's where the majority of their time is being spent.
Exactly, exactly. And there's been numerous studies done, with respect to gender and your learning, and how you learn. And, it is sometimes our male student population that experiences, I don't want to say more difficulty, but, requires, maybe a little bit of alternative teaching. And I think that when you see the numbers sometimes within those studies and, what boys are experiencing in the classroom and the difficulties that they're having, I think that sometimes in that sense, they'd want to look to strong male teachers. But at the same time, like I said, I don't think I've ever seen any sort of preferential behavior based on gender. I just think they'd like to see more males in schools because it still is a predominantly female vocation.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm just gonna jump back a little bit. But I guess during your entire career up until this point, um, is there any sort of group of allies that you have or mentors that you feel have really helped you to where you are today, and maybe they still help you?
So I've always been fairly lucky to kind of pick up a relationship or two at most places I've gone and worked at. Um, Starting from the very beginning, I would say that when you're in teachers college, you have to do your placements in actual classrooms, and those are with what are called your associate teacher. I'm still in touch with one of my associate teachers to this day. He really helped with the sort of cheerleading along to the process of getting permanent. And we still message every once in a while and joke about things, talk about the educational climate. So it's nice to have had somebody like him who's been with me, I guess, since 2012, who I'm still in touch with. And like I said, I've been lucky enough at some schools to pick up people along the way who I'll still bounce ideas off of, and kind of still reach out to, whether it's socially or whether it's for advice. And I think that the team that I work with right now is really great. I have a really strong department head. She's always very willing to assist and answer questions and provide guidance. So I think that I'm just particularly lucky that my teaching career has been one that is full of, I guess, openness and willingness to help, because I certainly know that there are experiences that people have where it's the opposite, and where more senior teachers are quite closed off and unwilling to share. And I've worked so many years on this. It's been, my pride and joy. I don't necessarily just want to give it to any teacher who will use it and adapt. Whereas now, and I don't want to say it's based on age, because I don't think that's true, but I just notice nowadays, and it might just be because things are digital as well now, like
Yep.
everything is available digitally. There's really a lot of a climate of, use and adapt as you wish, right? Or feel free to reach out to me and I'll share some resources. Whereas I don't think everybody's had that experience, which is unfortunate. I think that it is nice to be collaborative.
Absolutely. I mean, especially from someone who's done it and you think perfected their lessons and what they're doing, and they've known what works, what doesn't work. I mean, obviously things change in the sense of subject matter and et cetera, but I think it's so important to always give back to younger generation, to the new workforce. I mean, you would hope that you were so prideful of your industry and your career that you only want, the best of the best to be around there. So why wouldn't you want to help bring up the best of the best as well, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's two things I want to talk about that are very hot topics right now. They're a bit, I mean, they're elephants in the room. There's been so much going on. The first thing I want to talk about is, which many people may not be aware of, because this was an Ontario situation and problem. And the second one, of course, is a worldwide problem at the moment. But the first one is, so you currently, or you were on a strike, and that came, when did that begin?
Okay, so the Ford government, so the Ontario provincial government that's in place right now, came into power last spring. And people within the educational community were already rumbling at that point, even though we hadn't really said much yet, like that this is going to be a fiasco for education. He's going to make the cuts. We're going to see what we saw in the late 90s with the Harris government. And sure enough, we had, as of the end of August, our collective agreement was going to expire. So it was then up to the government and the trustees and the unions to try to get together and create another collective agreement for teachers. And at that point, within the media and to the unions, it was clear that there were cuts that they wanted to make. Probably the most talked about two would be the class sizes. They wanted to increase the class sizes. So right now, our board has a class size average cap of 22. But that doesn't actually mean that every class has 22 or less. It means an average. And so when you take into account the small special education, ESL specialty classes, as well as the guidance counselors who are technically teachers but do not have classes, the number gets to be quite skewed. So while the average is 22, my classes still all have 30 kids.
Yeah.
So when he wanted to raise those class sizes from 22 at first to 28, and my 22 average had a 30 kid count, you could see that that would balloon to be much more. So obviously that was one cut. To have more kids in one classroom would mean fewer teachers, would mean more money saved for the government. The other one was to make it mandatory for high school students to take 4 e-learning classes. And that was challenging because not only would that, be cuts and that it would take teachers out of the classrooms, but it would make less courses available for students to choose. So a lot of the electives would disappear. It wasn't really known who was going to teach those courses and if they would actually be Ontario certified teachers. And it also brought up a whole lot of equity issues, i.e. for kids that don't have internet or devices at home, kids that can't necessarily access a library, kids that just don't necessarily do well on that platform and would benefit from having a teacher in front of them rather than trying to learn independently online. Even doing it as an adult myself, I don't believe that online learning is for everybody. So it began at that. And then for months, kind of beginning in November, December, there was a lot of back and forth. The government said, okay, we're not going to go up to 28 in class size. We'll go to 25 instead. And instead of taking 4 e-learning classes, you're going to take 2. So they came down a bit, but the unions were kind of saying, we still don't want that. So we're lucky that just recently, they have announced, our union at least, there are 4 major teachers unions, but our union at least has reached a tentative agreement with the government. We don't know any details of it yet as members. We have to vote on it in the coming month. But they look to have maybe scaled back their wishes for class sizes in e-learning, which is what me myself, to speak for myself, that's all I really care about. A lot of rumbling in the media has been about the fact that teachers wanted a 2.5% cost of living increase, 2.5%, just to keep up with cost of living. And the government put into legislation that all public sector workers, including teachers, could only have 1% for the next 3 years. So a wage freeze, essentially. I personally would take that wage freeze if it meant class sizes and e-learning would not be a thing. That's me personally. There are definitely teachers out there that would be like, no, I definitely want my 2.5%.
Right. Right.
Me personally speaking, as long as we keep those kids, classes at a reasonable amount, and we don't make e-learning mandatory, we can make it optional, not mandatory. I will take the 1% for 3 years. That's me. But anyway, so we haven't been on like full blown strike. Like when we were younger in the 90s, we were off for like 2 weeks, I think it was, straight. We done, days here and there. So for the last, I would say, since the new year, I guess, every paycheck I've had has been affected by a strike day because, and I have to clarify this because some people really don't know, we do not get paid for strike days. Some people think that we do. We don't. We sacrifice our pay those days. So with regards to the strike, I really just hope that we can come to an agreement. I hope that what they've reached is one that all the members will approve of, and that even if it means taking a bit of a wage freeze, that we're looking out for what's best for our kids in terms of their class sizes and their ability to sit in a classroom and learn with an actual teacher and not in front of a screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a lot of stress for everyone involved. I mean, I know that it's something that is not only disruptive to you, it's disruptive to children. Now that you've been a part of your first strike, like what sort, like, do you have any sort of thoughts on like the positives of doing it, the negatives of doing it? I mean, what sort of is your feedback after, I guess, coming out on the other side per se at the moment?
The pickets themselves are a really immense display of solidarity. Like, it's amazing to be out there, and to be marching for something that you believe in with so many other people. I think that it's been a, kind of a decades long, um, you know, misassumption that, all we care about is just our salary, that, we're whiny teachers. We get the summer off, we get Christmas off, we get March break off, and we get a good salary. So, like, why are you complaining? Get back in the classroom. But it's not about that. And it really shows through when you're out there marching in the freezing cold, for no money, except the measly strike pay that you get. I truly believe that people wouldn't be doing it for an extra 1.5% of money. They're doing it for the better of the future generation. That's what
Right.
I'm doing it for. And coming out of the pickets, it's really great to see that, solidarity. So that's a huge positive. I would say that a negative, and what's very hard not to do, is to fall down the hole of social media keyboard warriors.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
because, of course, it was constantly, there were articles and updates being shared on Twitter, social media, like, Facebook. And sometimes I would just, not make the wise decision, and I would start reading people's comments on the articles. And it's a lot of bashing, but I got to remind myself that it's like people who write reviews for restaurants, right? You're
Yeah.
more likely going to have an angry reviewer than somebody who is going to praise you. And you got to just respect that not everybody is always going to see your point of view. But I know what I'm fighting for, and it's for the kids, not for my wallet. And that's something that really comes through when you see all those teachers marching together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it's unfortunate when that does happen. And, when it is someone who you can't even have a conversation with, they're just sending out things, they can't get a response. I mean, it's a very coward way of doing things.
Yep.
But I mean, it's so much more than that. Of course, you also see the disruption in children. I mean, I remember when strike days happened. For us, it was great, but you're so unfocused when you get back. I mean, no one is really retaining anything. You don't have that focus. You don't have that discipline.
No.
And so, yes, there could be some parents that are complaining and saying, teachers are being selfish, et cetera, but all of this is really affecting their kids as well. And I think it's easy to put blame on the kids, but there's also so much more blame on the people who are making the decisions for that to happen, right? And so
Okay.
it's a very stressful environment for everyone. And that kind of leads into what's going on now. I mean, you guys kind of just came on the other side of this happening, and now we're on day 2 of, at the most part, a 3-week quarantine for teachers and kids. And I mean, at the moment, it's going to probably be other people who are in the workforce, et cetera. So what is your thoughts on that at the moment? I mean, what has been shared with you? Is there, like, what are your thoughts and feelings of this, like the positive and negative of this happening? Like, what are your thoughts and feedbacks on the coronavirus?
So, I mean, like, as you were talking, I was like, this is a perfect segue into COVID-19, because it's so true. Like, with the strike days that we've had, even though they're important and they're necessary, with those strike days and with just other regular school interruptions like assemblies and PA days and stuff like that, it's been really hard to feel like this semester has really got underway. Like, for us high school teachers, we started the new semester at the beginning of February, and it seems like we haven't had like a full 5-day week. Like, there's always
Hmm.
something that's happening, whether it be, like I said, a PA day, the family day weekend, the strike days, assemblies that take you out of class. And so, myself and my colleagues, we would say to each other, like, it's really hard. Like, the students aren't into it. It's hard for us to fully be into it. Not that we're not trying to teach, but it's like, it doesn't have the same momentum as a
Of
regular semester.
course.
And, it was kind of nice to see this sort of diamond in the rough news of, we've potentially reached a tentative agreement, and maybe the strikes and the picket days will officially be over, and we can just cruise on out to the end of the school year and have no interruptions. Then it's like, boom, you're not coming back from March break. Staying home for another 2, which I will say, as much as teachers have had to say, myself included, about the Ontario government with regards to their cuts to education, I will say that I do think that this decision to close the schools after March break was a good one.
Yeah.
I don't think that, with the current state of things, I don't think you could trust every single student and family to self-quarantine after March break travel. I really don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the thing. They're doing it because it's for the better safety of everyone. Like, at my particular school, there's more than one student who's off in Iran right now. And Iran was one of the original do not travel destinations for COVID.
Right.
So, with a school, you're really putting the onus on the family and on the children to practice, social distancing and self-isolation after travel. But I just don't see, and I don't see it not just within parents and students, but I see it in the general population, where people still aren't listening.
Yeah.
And in a school like mine, which is close to 2,400 teenagers, if you can believe it,
Wow.
I really think that they made the right call. I'm just not really sure where to go from here, because we haven't been told that we have to go online. I am going to give my students some directive on our online portal, but not to do work, just to do some reading, because I think that they need me in order to be able to tackle some of the work. But if it goes longer than this, I'm not really sure what our directive will be, just because, some kids might choose not to log in at all, right?
Oh,
Kids might
absolutely.
access. And it's, again, bringing up that piece of, well, do we hold people responsible while they were trying to self-isolate and do the right thing for our country and our medical system? Or do we say, like, well, you should have been reading Macbeth, So that's the difficult part. I know there's certainly people out there, teachers included, that are theorizing that it might go longer than that April 6th date. I certainly hope not, because I want to be back in the classroom with my kids. It's already stressful enough to know that, in the middle of a Shakespeare unit, they're going to have to go it alone, because that's very intimidating. But right now, we just got to do what's best for our country, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a very confusing time for sure. It's kind of hilarious that all of these theories of online learning are literally now going to be put to the test to see, hey, are they actually working? Is it something that can happen? And what irony, of course,
Right.
for this to happen.
Conspiracy theorists get their hands on this, because they'd be all over it.
For sure, absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's a very difficult time. It's really hard to be motivated. It's really hard to want to be creative, to want to, just share positivity and etc. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's very insightful, especially for people who don't have kids in the system, for people who don't know teachers, for people who don't know really what's going on at all. So it is good to kind of have firsthand knowledge of what's going on, what your thoughts are. So yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, now we're gonna change, hopefully, to not any more dark topics.
No more.
It's been a lot. Yeah, so I guess I'm gonna change it a little bit here. We've talked a lot about teaching in your career. If you weren't a teacher and you weren't doing what you were doing now, what would it be, and what's holding you back from that?
So before I decided that I want to be a teacher, I think I decided that in grade 11. So before that, I kind of always thought about dabbling in like journalism, just
Mm-hmm.
because being an English teacher, writing was always one of my skills. Certainly interpersonal communication is a skill because I'm talking to kids all day long and putting myself up on the stage all day long and having people listen. So I always kind of dabbled in that idea. But then I was kind of like, especially looking back on it, I'm kind of like, I don't really know if the life of a journalist and the deadlines and the involvement with current events and the kind of having to be a gopher for years before you really kind of have your own sort of platform in order to be able to report. I was like, maybe that wouldn't be so great for me. I do tend to be more of an anxious personality. But I think one thing that would be cool, and just having people like you and some of our other friends, as inspiration, I think that writing in general, whether it be on just like a blog or, something like that, I think that that's really great. And I think that maybe as my life goes on and, I get, further and further into teaching and, things kind of sort of are, starting to feel a little bit stagnant. I don't think there's anything wrong with shying away from even just not even doing something on the side, in terms of income, but, just writing on the side in order to, fulfill other, kind of creativity callings that aren't being necessarily fulfilled in your day to day. So I would say that would be one thing. If I wasn't going to teach and going forward, if I was going to do something on the side that benefited me, it would just be right somehow.
Well,
Yeah.
there's no time like the present. You have 3 weeks.
Start a quarantine. Today I did this.
But that's awesome. And I mean, it's totally something you could do while you're teaching, of course.
Yeah.
But it is cool. I always like this question because sometimes I feel we really define people with the career that they have now. We can't see them in anything else. And I always love to see what's really deep in there and what is something that they truly have thought about and maybe would consider.
Yeah.
And I totally think it's something you can do. I mean, it's something you could start really, really small with and, just see where it goes.
Yep.
And it truly, we truly do live in a world that you can make so much out of a little piece of writing to a larger piece of writing. I mean, there's lots you can do with that. So I'm excited to maybe see something in the future from that.
Maybe.
What would you say is one quote or mantra that you live by?
Ooh. In terms of teaching or just life?
I would say just life. I mean, if you want it to be teaching, that's okay too.
So the only one that I can think of right now, and like it's corny but true. So I put this as my like quote at the end of my like grade 12 graduation blurb, like in the yearbook. So
Love it.
yeah, but I had written that the darkest hour is just before the dawn, and
Ah,
maybe that's applicable right now to the state of the world. Um,
totally.
and again, funny to look back on because I was 18 and cheesy and not experienced really much darkness at all. Um, but I would say that like it's just one of those things that is a nice way to say that we need to keep trucking through the bad times because oftentimes after we've kind of got through it, things become a little less sticky and maybe there are some good times to follow. So that's just one that sticks out in my head as hilarious as it is. But
Super relevant, super relevant.
super relevant. Yeah, it's I think it's a good one for all of us who are, gonna get a little cabin fever these next couple weeks.
Absolutely. No, I love it. Thank you so much. What would you say is one accomplishment you're extremely proud of?
One accomplishment that I am extremely proud of. Definitely getting permanent after those years of plugging and plugging and plugging, and continuing to persevere, um, despite principals saying no, we're going to go with somebody else. It's so hard to get rejected. So
Of course.
trying to keeping on is something. So I would say definitely acquiring that coveted permanent position. Um, but I think that another thing that I'm really proud of is just being on the same trajectory since high school and actually finally getting to that point that I thought I was going to get to. And that's not to say that anybody who has changed careers or changed mindsets is anyhow less, because people, I would say more people than not, probably change careers throughout their life. And who knows if I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I think it's cool that, at the ripe age of 16, I set out to do something, and I, finally went ahead and did that and got to be doing that, 15 or 16 years later. So I am proud that I stuck with something, I guess you can say. I think then the next step to being proud would maybe be getting out of my comfort zone and trying something new. I'm proud of having stuck with my same goal, but I think it's important to have new goals too. And so maybe if you talk to me in another little while, maybe I would be able to say that I'm proud of trying something new and that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with.
Absolutely. I think that's really optimistic to say. And also I do think it's really important to honor yourself for sticking for what you originally wanted to do. In
Yeah.
high school, it was so hard to truly know what you wanted to do.
I don't
I,
know. I don't know how we expect kids to know. I really don't.
and yeah, it's insane to even know. I mean, the amount of jobs and careers I've tried out. I mean, I feel like I've stuck to a similar theme, but at the end of the day, it's really, really hard to say, this is what I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to do, period, and that's it. And so it definitely takes a lot of guts to do that, especially with how easy it is to drop something, try something new, give up, do something different. With
Yeah.
all of the years of struggle that you went through, it's quite admirable to see someone actually do that, because it's easy to give up. It's easy to just say, well, I'm done, that's it, So it's a huge accomplishment for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. What would you say is the most embarrassing thing you've ever done at your job?
Oh my God, I don't know. I probably do a lot of embarrassing things. I can't. Oh, I know one. Okay. I had a little bit too much fun at a Christmas party the night before class one day. That's the drawback of being friends with so many people who work in the service industry. They always want to do things on school nights, and so
Yeah.
I normally decline, but this time I obliged. And I remember I was walking out to my portable to teach a class, and I obviously wasn't feeling my 100% self. And also we were having some construction around at the time, so I just was walking kind of lazily to class, and then my foot went in a divot, and then I just dropped to my knees and fell slowly as all the students were walking to class. And then a construction man is like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was really defeated. Thankfully, none of my students saw, but
If only they knew.
and I mean, really, I probably, like I said, do embarrassing things every day. I'm kind of at that cusp age right now where when they hear that I'm almost 32, they're like, "No, miss, you're 24." And I'm like, "Yes," but I'm still at that cusp of where I'm trying to keep on top of what's cool and potentially make cultural references that they'll be like, "Yes," but it's slowly, I think, starting to slip away from me. So probably
Oh,
I'll update embarrassing stories within the next little while as
love
well.
it. Love it. You need an embarrassing story teaching blog for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Um, so this kind of leads into my next question, but what do you think? I usually say people, but what do you think students automatically assume about you when they see you for the first time?
that I'm younger than I am, which I'm lucky to say. Um, and then actually, for the first time the other day, one of my kids said that he thought when he first met me that I was going to be really strict and sort of
Oh,
tightly wound,
interesting.
which is an anomaly. I don't totally always get that. In fact, I actually get the opposite, and it's probably part of my own doing. But I get the impression, or sorry, people get the impression of me that I'm going to be like a really relaxed, chill teacher, which I admittedly am for the most part. But it only becomes a negative thing when people become, I'm going to, or think that I'm going to be more chill than I actually am. And then I'm like, no, guys, shut up. And so that would be, I would say, the only thing they assume, that I'm going to be this like chillax teacher, maybe from what they've heard from their friends, whatever. Um, and then it works against me when I'm really trying to get things going.
Yeah.
But that's a once in a while. That's not like an always thing. But I'm lucky that I don't really have any super negative assumptions surrounding me, at least that I've heard. You never know what's going around on social media.
Oh my goodness. Um, I wasn't going to ask this question, but it just kind of came up. But how do you navigate being on social media as a teacher?
Private. Everything
Yeah.
is private. Facebook doesn't have my last name. Instagram private. Um, there are some pages, like for example, that my school runs, like teams or clubs within my school. There are like Instagram pages that kind of, update the school and keep the school on track, which some teachers have followed, but I'm not going to follow that with my personal account, because then they're going to see me and they're going to try to add me.
Right, right,
And
right.
sometimes kids really persevere and they really find you. And I'm like, girl, how? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we would do the same if social media was around when we were in high school.
100% I would. Not even a question. Um, so I'm fairly, lucky to have not really had any like weird breaches or anything like that.
That's
Um,
good.
but they'll make little jokes sometimes where like, oh, for example, a kid wanted to show me a meme last semester, and I was like, here, come show me, like on your phone type thing. And he was like stealthily like, hey, I can just like DM it to you if you want to give me your Instagram.
Oh, sliding into your DMs.
That's really smooth. But no, and it's funny because sometimes when I say like certain pages that I'm following or whatever, or I talk about a meme, they're like, Miss, you know about that? And I'm like, I do. I'm not a friggin' alien or living under a rock. Like, I look
Oh
at the
my
same things
goodness.
as you do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so hilarious. I mean, I can't even imagine what life would be like to have that kind of privacy, but also kind of be aware what's going on and everything. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing and
Yeah.
kind of hilarious at the same time. But I'm happy that you haven't dealt with anything that
Nothing, no,
is
nothing boundary crossing.
yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so I just have a few more questions left. What movie or book character would you say you're most similar to?
Girl, you should have given me a typed copy of these before the interview.
I love the quick topics without anyone's knowledge.
Yeah, no, they're good. And I can tell every time I listen to the show, I'm always like, that girl didn't know. She don't know. That what caught her off guard.
Yeah,
Um, book or movie?
yeah, yeah. Whichever one you feel like called to.
I If we're talking movie and we're talking about the early stages of my career when I used to work with the quote unquote more difficult student population, I definitely felt a little bit like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds.
Oh, okay.
Where she was kind of trying to make education happen for a more vulnerable population.
Yeah,
And that's like a classic 90s throwback movie with like
yeah.
Leo's Gangster's Paradise as the song.
Oh my God, yeah. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
that I definitely like. The day I fell in pothole walking in my portable, a little bit more like Cameron Diaz in Bad Teacher, but
Love it.
yeah, but I guess trying to think more like classic literature here. But like all I'm thinking of are like these, typical stories of the heroine like in Jane Eyre, and I'm just like, no, that ain't me. um, so we'll have to leave it at those movies for right now.
Yeah, I love it, and I love that they're both so different, but also I could see both personalities inside of you as well, good or bad.
Human, right? So like
Yeah.
everybody would want to be on paper that kind of teacher who, changes lives, educates kids, is an expert in their field. But it's like you got to be a human too, right? And that's when I also kind of feel like I've really connected with kids, is when they can look at me and like make a joke like that in the same way that, Cameron Diaz would have been like, "Ugh," in Bad Teacher. Like I do that to my kids. I'm like, guys, shut up. Like, so when they know that I'm more of a human and not just a teacher by, stereotypical standards, I actually quite value that rather than think of it as a detriment.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you related to teachers who are like that with you as well.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say is the best thing about being a female?
The best thing about being a female. Again, in life, I guess.
Sure. However you take the question.
I do think that it's amazing to be able to have, and again, this is not to say that males don't have this quality, but I think in terms of being a woman and also my career, to connect with that more nurturing quality that is often associated with womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea that, even though I don't have children of my own right now, that I still feel that I can nurture the minds, nurture the well-being, nurture the morals and attitudes of young people in the same way that I would want what's best for my own kids. And if that's a stereotypically woman thing to do, even though I believe males are, totally, able in this respect, if that's a stereotypically woman thing, then I like that about being a woman. On the flip side, I also like that essentially being on stage all day in my classrooms. I also
Mm-hmm.
like that I have a platform that I can show strength and breaking of stereotypes and explore those stereotypes when necessary. So I like that I can be a woman, but still be looked at by students of all genders as somebody who is strong, somebody who is intelligent, who is capable. And I just like that ability of being able to even just talk about what is being a woman and what is being a man within my classrooms. And we do that. We were doing that right before we went on break with Shakespeare. We talk about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man, and the fluidity between those different concepts and their stereotypes. And I guess it's less to do with being a woman myself, but more to do with the fact that I like having the platform to be able to break down gender and talk about the capability of all genders.
Yeah, I honestly love that so much. Such a beautiful and eloquent way to say that, because I do think as women at this moment in time, we truly are lucky to be able to switch hats when we want to. We can be super feminine, super masculine, and everyone's okay with it. I do hope the same for men in the future. I do know it's there, but it's not there in the same way. People are still judged by being too feminine, too emotional, etc. Right. So I do agree with you. Women do have that privilege for sure at this point in time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Last question is, what teacher has had the biggest impact on your life?
so for those of you that know me who are listening, you probably already know the answer to this question, but his name is Mr. Zakulin, and he was my grade 11 English teacher. He also then ended up teaching me grade 12 writer's craft and grade 12 studies in literature. And he was just like, he is the person that made me want to do what I do. Again, going back to the yearbook blurbs, I so shouted him out, like looking back on it.
Aw.
But yeah, no, he was amazing. He was not rigid at all. He was very fluid. He didn't really have an agenda, and he was totally cool with walking into the classroom and getting into a conversation about something we were reading. And if the whole class, was taken up by that conversation, he didn't care. He didn't care about giving out chapter questions. He didn't care about pen and paper activities. If the class was comprised simply of conversation, he felt that that was enough. And I think that, first of all, the way that he loved English and teaching English made me somebody who was more enthusiastic about reading and writing. He really polished my writing skills. He really encouraged my love of reading and my ability to analyze reading. So he made me a better English student. But looking back on it now that I am in my career and I see the way that I teach and the way that I interact with the kids, I see that it's based a lot around the way that he was, right? Not necessarily, like I said, following an agenda or assigning chapter questions or saying, make sure you do this by tomorrow or make sure you do this homework. It was more about just really getting kids to think. And, if we're kind of ending off here, I would say that that's literally my favorite part of my job is when I see even just one kid in the sea of 30 look at me and do that nod, or like you see light bulb go off or those wheels turn, like there's nothing that feels better than saying something and the kid's like, yeah, I get it, or yeah, I see. And
I love it.
And he did that for me constantly. And my job, I don't define as, how many of my kids got A's on their essays, because I know that the whole class is never going to accomplish that. But when I see even just one kid nod along in class, knowing that they're hanging on to my every word and knowing that they understood what I just said, that is what makes my job worth it. And I honestly got that from him, I think.
I love that. I honestly got goosebumps as you're explaining that, because it's such a silent thing that happens, but
Yeah.
something that has affected them so deeply. And
Right.
it's such a beautiful thing, I'm sure, for you to see that happen.
Well, and that's the thing that I would clarify too to listeners. They rarely ever say, "Oh, I get it," right? But you can see it in their face. And when you see that, and it's hard to explain, when you see that glimmer, when you see the nod, when you see something go off, and you know that they're not just looking at you blankly, like they are actively interested in what you're saying, there's really no feeling like it.
Oh, I love it. So, have you ever told him? Have you ever shared your revelations of that experience with him? I do. I know it's a scary thing. But I hear all the time people who, have this relationship or mentorship with someone that has truly affected them. I mean, there's many people that have affected my career who I still want to let know, and I have let a few people know, but I do think it's important, because you just never know what they know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you never know if people are actually getting it. I mean, he doesn't know that he's affected people's lives.
Yeah, like I went back during Teachers College to volunteer in some of his classes. So I think he certainly knew that I connected with him as an educator, but I can't say that I've ever outwardly said any of this stuff.
Yeah.
It certainly would be something potentially worthwhile sharing, because I know that if I ever did that for somebody as a future educator, I would want to know, because that would just be amazing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think even I'm sure you feel this way when a student, gets something, or they say something back that maybe you had no idea about. It changes so much of what you do and your perspective and et cetera. And it makes you feel like you've done what you were here to do, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just a challenge I put out there for you and anyone else who has someone that has, truly changed either their career or whatever. It's a difficult thing to do, but I'm sure it's not something that you'll ever regret.
Probably not.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know we touched on some dark topics, but also some lighter ones too. Now that we're leaving this, the beginning of this week of quarantine, is there anything you want to share that you don't feel we've talked about, or anything else that you kind of want to leave this conversation with?
I just think that I spend every single day, and parents spend every single day looking out for the well-being of the future, right? For our kids, our students, etc. I think in this kind of scary time ahead, I think that we should all put on, whether we are parents, whether we are teachers or not, let's put on that hat, think about the future of this country, think about the future of our world, and really do everything that we need to do collectively to ensure going forward that our future has the best chance. And those are our kids, right? So let's do our part.
Amazing. I love it. I usually get people to share where they can find them, but I know that with your profession, you're super private. So feel free to do that. If not, it's no problem at all. We can find extra ways of people reaching out to me if someone truly feels the need to get in touch with you.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing. I would say reach out to our girl, Lindsay Mitchell-Dent, because I will keep my social anonymity for right now, but certainly open to any questions or comments if anybody ever does want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your quarantined time. Maybe get some writing done.
Maybe, or some deep cleaning. We'll see.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
You're
welcome.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I greatly appreciate the time that you took to listen and learn a bit more about another woman in business who is truly moving and shaking the world. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it too. These small actions truly mean the world to a small business owner like myself. If you're a business owner looking for inspiration and guidance in growing your business, I would love to help you. I also will be giving my listeners $25 off my Creativity Strategy Hour. By using promo code CreativityAndLove, you can use it at checkout and get it on my website, which is available on the show notes, or at www.pinkcrowncreative.com. You can also stay up to date with the latest podcast releases, behind the scenes, and insider info about each guest by following us on Instagram at Have You Met Her Yet series, or by signing up for our weekly newsletter, which will bring each episode right to your inbox. Thank you so much for listening. It truly means the world. We wish you a wonderful week and hope that it is filled with creativity and love.